You're listening to the I Love You Keep Going podcast with George Haas. For more information, please visit our website at www.mettagroup.org. That's www.mettagroup.org.
So welcome, everybody. This is I Love You Keep Going. It is Thursday, September 26, 7:38 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And I thought that I would talk a little bit about the difference between auto-regulating and exploration. This is something that comes up quite a bit, and depending on what your attachment conditioning is, really makes sense. And we have a culture that really is very devoted to distraction as a way of getting through things without actually having to pay much attention to them. And a lot of our distraction is based on ultra-violent fantasy, which is, I think, useful in a sales-oriented culture because it creates fearfulness in people. You engage in ultra-violent fantasy, it creates an expectation in the imagination that you're going to be retaliated against because the imagination doesn't care whether it's real or not in terms of creating the kinds of expectations that you anticipate. And a lot of us who have or have had insecure, disorganized attachment, as the accumulation amasses throughout our teens and 20s, in our 30s, begin to withdraw from social engagement because of not that we're so interested in being alone, but that the confusion around how to make relationships work, and the triggering of the disappointment from relationships not working causes us to be reticent about engaging as freely in beginning relationships as we did when we were younger. And as we withdraw from relationships, we need to have something that takes up that time. So you could push more into secondary exploration, where you really put more and more hours into earning resources, time, energy, and resources, if you have the kind of work where you can actually go in more. So then you find it's not just the full-time, but it's beyond the full-time amount of time that you're spending at work. And you're really oriented around what those work demands are. Or you create these activities that are very involving, very consuming, but are very also solitary. And the things that you discover in the exploration, in the time that you spent engaged in the activity, is not something that completes the cycle of exploration. So what I think about that is that we go out into the world and explore, and then we come back and we express the things that we found out to the people that are interested in us and interested in our capacities to explore and what we find out. And that loop, that going out and discovering things and coming back and reporting and exchanging and sharing, that is the whole loop of gathering meaning and exploration. And then, of course, if you're in collaborative relationships, they're also going out and exploring and coming back and reporting to you what they've found out. And if you line up your explorations, your primary explorations, closely enough, there's a real synergy and energy that floats the relationship, as the exchange of information is also useful, so vital to each other. And we learn to do this really early on in childhood. We're all born as autoregulators, and over the course of the first few months of life, if somebody comes regularly enough, we reorient toward an external source of regulation. And if that external source of regulation is reliable enough, we move into this collaborative stance of understanding that there is regulation available to us when we need it, and developing the capacity to regulate ourselves by imitating the regulation that we get from someone else, and using that to carry us out into uh, exploring the world and discovering the things that matter to us. And then, of course, coming back to that secure base to express the things that we've discovered. And if you've ever been around small children, you'll see them doing that, going out a few feet, finding something, and coming, rushing back and showing it to the caregiver. And how the caregiver responds to that is what the child learns in terms of the value of their own capacity to explore. Is it something that is of interest, of relevance? Is the caregiver supportive in response to that? Are they not? Autoregulation is this activity that consumes the time, energy, and bandwidth of someone, but it is not part of that cycle of exchange. It is really something that you can engage in that actually has relevance to you while you're doing it, but it isn't part of an expression. And if you do end up putting your authenticity into it, and it becomes an authentic expression of you, uh, what prevents you then from sharing it? And often there's a process of secretiveness. This is true of people who only learn auto-regulation. They don't learn the collaborative exchange of regulation with other people. So you would say dismissing adults or disorganized adults who are avoidant, they're the ones who are mainly engaged in this. So you find activities that consume your interest and attention that you can really get into, but it isn't part of this process of authentic expression. It's not part of this process of the exchange of ideas. Is that making sense? This is different than, say, what a preoccupied person might do in terms of exploration, because they're so inhibited from actually being able to explore. They don't develop much of a capacity to explore, and what they rely on is an exchange with someone else. But when you form relationships in a dismissing or avoidant way with a preoccupied person, still that process of auto-regulating is not really expressed freely with somebody else. So even that is withheld from those relationships. And they orient around secondary exploration, the pursuit of time, energy, and resources. So if we're looking at that, the avoidance side of things, disorganized, avoidant people avoid expressing themselves authentically because they're afraid that those expressions will be used to exploit them eventually, that they'll be used to harm them. And so they're guarded about that. So that and because they are also the most isolated socially, they often do find pathways of interest and exploration that have meaning, but also consume a lot of time. But there really is never much of an intention to express it. And there's a shyness about it often, of expressing it, a fearfulness about expressing it. It's also, because of the disorganized nature of things, often incomplete and ranging as opposed to whole or cohesive. Pieces in this direction and in that direction that never really come into much. That doesn't matter so much to the person as they're doing it, because there's never an intention to finish it, really. There's never an intention to make it into an expression that somebody else could really understand. It's simply meant to consume the time of being alone. course, it doesn't have to be cohesive. It doesn't have to be a whole of something. It just has to be an expression of something that is received by someone else. We don't really have the capacity to see ourselves very clearly. We don't really have the capacity to see those creations very clearly. We need that reflection of other people to understand how we're communicating it. We all have a unique experience of meaning in the world. And as each moment unfolds, we have this unique experience that is our guide to interpreting what is actually happening. So the capacity to sense meets the object that can be sensed, which creates a consciousness of the sensing experience, which is evaluated for urgency. Does it not matter whether we get to it? Is there time for a pleasant experience? And as that cue forms and the sensing experience reaches the top of it, it's compared to the perceptual database. And in that perceptual database are all of the experiences that have been defined already. And if there's one that's close enough to it, the mind attaches the present moment to that meaning thread and it rolls into conceptual reality. But if you move into the advanced mentalizing stages, you really do begin to understand the history of meaning that is in each moment of the creation of reality that we all do. You really see that it represents that it represents almost in some sense a whole subsistence system of your experience. Of course, if there isn't an experience like that, the imagination will kick in and create a meaning for it. But it's your unique meaning. And if we don't express all of these avenues that we explore, and we're simply using it as a way of consuming the times that we're not in a terrible state of longing, a desperate state of loneliness, which is the great enemy of using auto-regulation as your way of getting through things. How do we know if the expression that we're making is actually communicating the thing that we want it to, if it's unexpressed and we don't have the feedback from someone else? And how easy it is to lose the track of what it is that we're actually intending to discover without that constant reflection from other people. So if you find that you do engage in autoregulation quite a bit, this encapsulating of yourself and this withdrawing from the stimulus of the outside world, the case needs to be made to persuade you to open up the expression of that. What is it that would allow that to happen? And this also depends a lot on your attachment conditioning, because if you are an organized person and you're dismissive and you engage in a lot of auto-regulation, what you begin to understand is actually the expression of it is better than the auto-regulation is. It's more compelling, it's richer, it creates a greater sense of meaning. But you have to be willing to risk that initial exposure in childhood, in the process of learning to idealize, which is one of the characteristics of organized avoidant attachment or dismissing attachment, anxious avoidant attachment in childhood, is that all of the negative things are stripped out, and the positive aspects are pumped up or hyper. Um, and then that can really be distorting in terms of how you create something whole, which is going to obviously be a balance of positive and negative, or maybe not so obviously, but yes, that typically is what it is. So the constant removal of the negative and the exaggerating of the positive is that process of idealization, which is necessary. But in the process of that, and remember that anxious avoidant children are idealizing what the caregivers want, not what they want, what the caregivers value, not what they value. And if the constant rejection of the authentic expression, or sometimes accompanied by the shaming of the authentic expression, the only way to really preserve it is by keeping it completely secret, because if it were to uh, arise in the family system, it would be stomped on, would it?
The aspect of coming back to the secure base, the caregiver, there was a thread which was like, oh, if you come back to the caregiver, you're, hey, how is this drawing? And the caregiver says it's great, and then it comes back and says it's great, and then sometimes it says it's not great. I mean, I guess the caregiver is not faking saying it's fantastic because it's a kid.
Well, the always coming back with great would be more of an idealizing version. Whereas if the caregiver was delighted and interested and curious about the child's point of view and engaged in a dialogue about the drawing, that would be better.
Aha.
So it
So not
represented
just
actual interest.
so not just compliments, but oh, so what do you think of this drawing? Or what
Oh,
interacting?
this is my experience of this drawing. What were you doing when you made the drawing? And what part of the drawing do you think is really good? And what do you like about it? Why did you do it this way instead of doing it that way?
I
So that
see.
the child is really invited to make an expression about what it is.
Aha. I see.
Oh, or if they bring you a bottle cap, or they find a rock, or whatever it is that they in that moment have discovered, you're curious about what it is that was meaningful to them, that it was enough that they would show it to you, and then you give it back to them, right? So that they can then continue on. And then you might even keep track of the different drawings that they've done and compare this drawing to another drawing that they've done. So they have a sense that you're really interested in the things they're doing and that it has an effect on you. Really, that's the thing. I make an expression of my interest and you receive it and it has an effect on you and you respond to it. And that confidence that you can affect the world is really the thing that supports the exploration. I matter. I can change the world by the things that I do, the things I'm interested in, even from a young age.
Thank you very much. And I guess the vlogging, which is such a big piece of our culture, that you did already mention this, but that doesn't really count. Like if I let's start making vlog tomorrow, I post it on YouTube and there's a lot of people interacting with me. And they're giving me very big compliments how I've inspired their lifestyle. That you were saying has some impact, but not as much as a real person.
Well, it depends on the purpose of the blog. Most of the time, it reads like a sales pitch. To me, maybe I'm cynical. I am, but I mean,
A video blog?
what is the purpose of it? And is it an authentic representation of what actually is happening and what what you're actually thinking and feeling, or is it something else?
So giving like fitness advice to the world.
Right. And are you giving fitness advice because you're selling supplements in the link, or you have a book, or
I see. Just sharing.
soliciting clients? So then it's really secondary exploration, which is fine, but it isn't primary exploration.
Or you might get both of that, where people do come back and they share something, and then you feel good that people are responding to you and interacting with you, and
Right.
it blends in together.
But is that social media exposure the same thing as intimate dialogue with somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not. Let's say you're followed by 4.2 thousand people. How intimate can it be?
Some comment like, oh, I started doing the same exercise and now I feel much better. So there's this aspect of effect on the world.
Right. But is that, I'm not, I'm hearing myself talk and thinking, oh, I'm slagging off secondary exploration, but that's not really what I'm trying to do. Intimate, in the way that you structure, or at least the way I think about structuring relationships, is there's a line, and above the line you tell people everything, but you don't tell everything to people that you don't know and haven't proved that they're trustworthy to handle it. So that people that are less intimate, you're telling some things to, and you're representing some things to, not the intimate exchange where you actually feel seen and known. And that's at the level that I think is more important in terms of the reflection of and the capacity to be accepted by somebody who really sees you and knows you and sees you frequently and sees each of your days unfold, and what's difficult and what isn't difficult, and what's good and what isn't good, so that you can, uh, when you express to them, it's the most unvarnished and open, which is probably not what's happening on social media, or at least I'm not aware of it happening.
There's a sense that my secure base might not be in lifestyle and fitness, but the people who are watching it are very specific to that particular lifestyle.
Right.
So
But you
secure
might,
be like, oh, that's amazing. That's what I get. Oh, that's awesome that you're doing this. But beyond that, there isn't any.
right, connection. Or if you go regularly to the same places and encounter people and develop relationships that are actually about your beingness and not about the activity that you're engaged in. And so really not to knock the activities there. I'm not, that's not it. But can you, if you're on the auto-regulating side of things, begin to open that vault of what's really central and begin to express it, but do it in such a way that the people that you pick to express it to cherish it in the way that it should be cherished because it's valuable. And, for uh, avoidant people, uh, it's a huge risk in terms of feeling, because it's so impacted from the experiences of early life where it was so unwelcome in the family system. And one of the ways to normalize that, of course, is to make the expressions and see that they actually aren't worthy of dismissal or rejection in the way that they were. That when you step outside of that idealizing a way of navigating the world, the ordinariness of so much of what was not acceptable comes to light. With disorganized people, it's a little bit different because it isn't the fear of humiliation, the fear of rejection that is so much a problem for them, but the fear that they're going to be killed if they make a mistake. And that creates often a pressure for perfectionism. But the purpose of the perfectionism is not to make the work perfect, but to make sure that the reaction to the work isn't going to be threatening. And so what tends to happen there is that the thought loops keep going of what to do, how to respond, how to express over and over again. And eventually what you figure out is any of the expressions would have been fine, but you can't make them because the fearfulness of how they'll be received. And there's a process of encoding them in riddle structures, really the most Baroque puzzle box of how to get to the real meaning of what's being offered. And then often accompanied by not being really seen and not being understood, and then the anger that comes from that. And paradoxically, making the riddles more complex rather than solving them. So the move out of autoregulation is this process of finding a way to express it, finding a way to make a representation of the authentic experience that you're having and express it in a way that is comprehensible to the people that you're expressing it to, and taking in their reaction to it, so that there is finally this active loop of exchange. I talk about it in this mentalizing process. You understand the experience that you're having and the meanings that you've associated to it, made it into. You understand what about that meaning experience that you want to express, which is representative of your authentic understanding. And then you transliterate it, that's the second part, into a way that somebody else could understand what you mean. If it's an intimate exchange, of course, you're translating it into the terms of the person that you know, so that you're expressing what you mean in the same terms that they understand that, rather than insisting on your terms, which they may interpret differently. That making sense. And then you spend a little bit of time to make sure that they've understood you. And when you're confident that they've understood you, then you take in their response to what they've understood. And then you take a little bit of time to make sure that you understand what they mean in your terms, so that you're actually in a process of communication, and then you modify your understanding of the relationship based on each of these exchanges that are made. And that would be the process within which exploration can be really deep and well exchanged, and where you can find the support from people into pursuing the things that you really want to go after. That making sense? Whereas in auto-regulating, you're really just finding an activity that you can concentrate on and almost merge into, that then takes up the time when you're alone, so that you don't have the experience of the emotional dysregulation that comes from too much social isolation. And sometimes there's a little bit of exchange, but maybe not altogether enough. I remember for, I don't know, 20 or 25 years, I grew bonsai trees. And it was really one of the great auto-regulating activities because they were living things that you had to take care of on a schedule or they would die. And so there was no putting it off really. And there were certain times of year that took a lot of activity to do them. And every now and then you would go and join the larger community and you'd be engaged in these conversations about it and to go to demonstrations and go to shows and all that stuff. But largely the activity was auto-regulating, so that it suited me very well as a long time auto-regulator. Uh, and they were living and delightful and the depth of knowledge was, unlimited in terms of what you could find out about making them stay alive, which was the great activity. But it,
So, so you're saying this activity of auto-regulation, it felt like you were sharing, right? But not on a regular basis.
well, all of the sharing was in the range of the auto exploration. There was no intimacy, really. There was no really even uh, uh, friendship connection. It was really based around the activity itself without anything personal.
With the activity, like
Yeah.
no meaning. And when you did change this, or when you stopped doing this, and then you started doing something else, and was it like immediately you felt meaning when you did something else?
Well, I think what happened is as my meditation experience progressed and other things that I began to do, the demand of my time for more intimate exchanges became preferable to the time of auto-regulating. And so I had less and less time available. And with bonsai in particular, uh, they're living things, you have to take care of them. And they respond by saying, I'm dying now, fuck you.
But
You
not
didn't
every
take
day.
care of me, so I'm dying.
Is it like every day or is it like once a week?
Oh, watering, every day or every other day, and pruning and wiring and all the whole thing.
Every day.
Yes,
Wow.
uh, a lot of effort to get them to thrive. And as I got more and more drawn into actual interpersonal connections with people and intimacy, that the demand for hours and hours and hours of auto-regulating became unsupportable.
I think mine is fitness, but it also has some other benefits that I get in the future.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you got to take care of the body. There's no question about it.
right.
The more you do it, the better it is because you don't have so many ailments that get in the way of life.
Right, but I don't think I'm doing it as a means to, uh, you know, to be good for the body. But I think it is auto-regulation activity that I've been doing for many years.
Yeah.
So
Then see if you can shift it into intimate connection with people.
you mean not using the same activity? It has that first activity has to be meaningful to me, right?
Yeah. But you can also form intimate connections in addition to just the auto-regulating activity. It's a shift that you always do it alone, or is there some involvement with other people? Uh, that's really the shift. And in that process of revealing yourself authentically to people, of course, you're doing it with consent and you're doing it within the agreement of the relationship. so that
This is
people
where
see you, know you.
the paradox of like putting your needs, maybe my habits and my needs are working out by myself because I have a very strict routine. But then I put them slightly less and I put the connection part more above those
Right,
needs.
right.
So there's a little bit of compromise that you have to do.
Yeah. Well, yeah, prioritizing the connection over the activity, which is not to say you can't do the activity in the way that you want. So, why don't we stop there and do some practice? What would you like to practice?
Meta sounds good.
Okay. Okay. Let go of the meditation. So, any comments or questions about the practice?
It does it become hard with time? I don't know why, what's going on. It's just the practice.
Harder?
Yeah, it says the energy of peace is much higher than the energy of metta. Maybe it's metta is more energy consuming.
Um, say more. I'm not quite sure what you're asking yet.
Just the either I'm too restful and peaceful, or I'm on the other side.
Uh,
Uh,
so you're settling in past loving kindness. Are you holding the mind state?
yes, but I cannot do it for too long. Because distractions would come in and
So then it's not enough concentration.
yeah.
That yeah, concentration is one of those things that comes and goes.
Uh-huh.
We can really develop it, and most of the time, if you develop it well enough, you can reach access concentration, but sometimes it's hard to get beyond that.
Falls off very quickly if you stop practicing.
So then you just reset over and over. Thanks. So the only thing that hasn't started this year that we're going to do is the exploration workshop in October, which is at the end of the month. And we're going to talk about, in the first exploration workshop, we talked about the intermediate level of mentalizing and what that skill set is. We mainly talk about the basic level of mentalizing or metacognition skills in the level 1 and level 2 work we do, because that's what's necessary. And the top of that basic skill set is meaning making. And then as you move into the intermediate steps, that really deepens your capacity to explore for meaning. But in the workshop that we're going to do in October, I'm going to go through the advanced mentalizing uh, or metacognition skills. And these really do pertain to spiritual practice and this meditation work that we're doing, because it's difficult to come into those that level of metacognition without the framework of the spiritual practice, at least for me. It makes complete sense that we would do that. And then, we're coming toward the end of the year. It's amazing how quickly it's gone, I think. Then we'll begin again in the new year. Thank you for your practice. Really appreciate it. Happy that you've come. I offer the teaching freely, but I do hope that if you're resourced and you can make a donation, that you will. It helps support me and also the work Mettagroup is doing. There's a link on the website, and I hope to see you soon. Bye. Oh, did you get the email about tomorrow's shoot?
I did not.
Let me forward it to you now, just so you have it. You have it now?
Should come soon. Yeah, I got it.
Okay, great.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, see you later. Bye.